Okay, hello everybody, it's me Sadahat from Global Shapers Faisalabad Hub, and I am back at it again with another Hub Talk after a long time. So I hope you all are doing well, especially regarding the current situation of COVID-19. So yeah, today's topic is racism. I will be talking about this particular topic with Aviva Funani. So the reason for choosing this topic is that we all have been in the past few weeks bombarded with words such as racism and white supremacy and Black Lives Matter, right? So all this started on 25th of May 2020 when George Floyd was brutally murdered by four police officers in Minneapolis, the state of Minnesota. So since then we all can see, we all have witnessed how furious people were and how they responded to that, not only in the United States but all around the world. So today I'm here with Aviva Funani. I will be discussing I will be talking about racism in particular, and we will be digging deep into this topic and look for the reasons and potential solutions. So Aviva Funani, she is an activist. Also, she is the curator of Cape Town Global Shapers Hub. And apart from this, she is the program manager at Waves for Change and has been named one of the 50 most inspiring women for 2019 in South Africa. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and as soon as she has joined us, we can begin. So I'll just quickly check on her. Okay, she might be joining shortly. So if you have anything to say regarding this topic, regarding racism, regarding colorism, regarding white supremacy, just let us know. Write it in the comments and we will try to talk about this. So I'm just waiting for Aviva to join and then the conversation can begin. Alright, Aviva is there. Hello, Aviva.
Hi. Hi,
Hey,
can you
how
hear
are
me?
you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. You tell me,
Are
how's the
you
situation regarding COVID?
in South Africa at the moment? Oh my gosh, we've had way more cases. Just a quick one. Are you happy with me logging in with my personal account, or do you want me to join with our Hub account?
It's all up to you actually, whatever you wish for.
Okay. Okay, cool. No, this is okay, cool. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Okay, thank you for
Cool.
joining me today, Aviva, taking some time out of your precious time and joining me. Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
already give a quick intro into this, what we are about to talk about, like racism, colorism, white supremacy, Black Lives Matter movement in particular.
Yeah.
So it is a very sensitive topic, and I think we all are well aware of this. But I think it's also very necessary that we talk about it, that we confront people with it. So at the very beginning,
Exactly.
before we start the whole conversation, right? I want to like clarify the terms racism, the white supremacy, and like the Black Lives Matter. For those people who haven't interacted very well with this topic or have some issues with it or like some other problems. So, Aviva, starting with you, like, could you define racism?
Please say that again, Sarah. I lost you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back on. I just lost you there as you started giving your question.
I asked, like, how would you define racism?
Okay. So, in my opinion, racism is a particular race seeing themselves as being superior based on the mere color of their skin. So, or even not just having a sense of superiority, but sometimes it's extended to a sense of hatred towards people of another race based on the color of their skin purely. And this factors in and it goes into things that affect like what becomes systemic racism that is rolled out through like education systems, through the work systems, through social spaces, all because it's embedded first in terms of hatred, and also a sense of feeling superiority, and also sometimes it's very much triggered by a sense of fear of another race having a sense of superiority over that one race.
Okay, that's pretty well explained, I think. So connecting
Yeah.
to this particular point, how would you like define white supremacy?
So white supremacy is a state, I think it just ties back to what I just spoke about, a sense of feeling that you are superior. And because of having that state of mind, feeling, it becomes a sense of abusing power or abusing position based on the color of your skin, and then also because of benefiting from things like systemic racism, using those aspects or those area of one's life to actually inflict a sense of abuse or a sense of bullying on another race.
All right, thank you for explaining it so well. So I already said in the introduction, like the Black Lives Matter movement, it started all with the case of George Floyd, right? So it was devastating what happened to him, and I don't think like we have to like recall all the things and mention what happened. I guess we all have seen those videos on our social media. So moving on to the topic, like how would you define Black Lives Matter movement? Like what does this stand for?
So interestingly enough, the Black Lives Matter movement has been around for a couple of years now because police brutality is something that is not new in America. It has not started with George Floyd. I think with George Floyd, it was just a matter of it scaling, and now it's become something that around the world people can recognize. But the Black Lives Matter movement has been around for years, started by 3 females in America, and just standing and saying that why is it so easy for police in America to shoot and kill people of color? Like, why is it so easy to not value or put respect on particular people based on the color of their skin? And that's where this movement came from. And it started becoming a hashtag that people, it's easy to use and say, you know what, our lives matter. stop treating us like our lives don't matter. Don't. If it's easy for you, someone else of another race who is Caucasian or whatever, if they do something, you take them into the prison system. After a few months, they're free. You're putting less value on someone of color based on the color of their skin and saying they don't have enough to add in terms of value to the economy, in terms of just their humanity. You're saying that they are worth less, so you can kill them if you want. People can be unfairly detained. So it's a whole systemic move. It's a whole move that is saying, you know what, we need to call to action and bring things to the surface that have been going wrong.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And also for people who don't know, this movement already existed before, like Aviva just told us. It was just like George Floyd's case was just a trigger point, I guess, where just people actually realized what's happening because we had that proof, we had the video to watch it. So, right.
Yeah.
Like I have seen a couple of videos after that, like for example, a little girl, like she told her mother like that she is ugly because she's black and started crying, you know, and that kind of impact what this whole scenario has on children and on the black community in large. So
Yeah.
what else do you think, what kind of impact does racism act have on like upon the victim, upon those who are like belong to the same community? Can you tell me something about this, please?
So it's been, you know, racism is quite it's a difficult thing because it's been around for years. And I think we've overlooked it. I know as a person of color, every person of color, if I speak to them in South Africa in some way or another, have experienced racism. But sadly enough, if you speak to someone who's white in South Africa and ask them, have they ever experienced racism? Many will say no. And many will say they are not racist or they don't hang out with racists. But at the end of the day, if you've got so many people that are saying they've experienced racism and it's real to them, and then you've got another group of people saying, it existed during apartheid, but it doesn't exist now because I'm not affected by it. That says something somewhere is wrong. And something somewhere we're not being authentic in how, number one, we're being treated, or the narrative that we give out, how it's being handled. And then secondly, that means that there's a lot of missing in terms of allyship, which I think this moment with George Floyd has really seen people of color saying that, you know what, we need allyship. We've been speaking for years. The Black Lives Matter movement is not new. You know, things like apartheid in South Africa, you know, there's so many things, going back to colonialism, going back to slavery. All those things have been an expression of racism, have been an expression of white supremacy. It's nothing new, but I think this moment has been a moment that says, okay, you know what, we're tired of saying there's a problem and everyone else says, no, there's no problem, which I think affects a myriad of things. So it affects the fact that in schools, what we get taught, Black history is not taught in schools, or it's not taught in the way where it celebrates the knowledge, the wisdom, and the expertise of people of color. We talk about science, we talk about inventions. Black stories are not being told in a way that celebrates Blackness or the authenticity and the strength of people of color, which is very sad. And so that again is plugged into the system, because for very long the system has let people get away with saying, no, we don't know any Black inventors, no, we don't know any Black scientists, no, we don't know enough Black history, and that's a lie. And we've not held countries accountable that were colonialists and have benefited from, for example, the African continent, and we say, no, it's fine, you can, you know, get away with doing charity or doing good deeds and giving to African countries, and that hides, or that gives you permission to not deal with the elephant in the room, which is racism. And so there's so many different aspects. You touched on colorism. Colorism is also the fact that for so many years in the beauty industry, the beauty industry has been taking ideas from the Black community for so long, and yet has never really acknowledged or recognized the beauty of Blackness. The fact that for years there were specific body types and body shapes that were only accommodated in things like fashion. In terms of like makeup, for many years there was no representation in terms of makeup that matched the skin tone of people of color. So those are just examples of where systemic racism for years has just been there, and we've not held people accountable. We've not held the people who are producers as consumers. We're just buying, but we're not saying, oh, wait a minute, I'm not being represented here, so I'm not going to buy from you. Yeah.
Okay. So did you personally ever face racism?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think it's a very sad thing that every person of color has experienced racism, but if we ask anyone who is not a person of color, they'll say, it's something that used to exist in the days of my grandfathers, but I'm not like my great-grandfather, and I've never experienced racism. I've never been racist. I've got Black friends. I'm dating someone who is of color. It's sad that we've got those two sides of the stories, where for every Black person, regardless of whether you were born into a so-called free country, that you still, whether when you go to apply for school, that whether when you are in university, whether you're at work, you're always constantly encountering racial inequality. So it's a reality that most of us as people of color have faced and continue to face, unfortunately.
Okay. And how did you ever respond to the racism that you were like surrounded to in this particular situation?
So, South Africa is also a very tricky place because we have the legacy of apartheid. We had segregation based on color, and there was just so many unfair laws that treated people of color differently and ensured that they could never fulfill their fullest potential. In terms of the workplace, in terms of school, in terms of relationships, they were always segregated. And so growing up in post-apartheid South Africa, firstly, I know there were many spaces. If I think of like my old primary school, there were so many cases where people still enjoyed being racist, they were unapologetic about it. They still used terms that were racist and dehumanizing and undermining of people of color. And I think for a very long time, like as a child, I could never really understand why. Like I'd always feel bad for it, like I've done something wrong as being Black, like I've done something wrong just by being Black. And I think it's in growing up that I've realized like there's so much beauty in Blackness. There's so much beauty in the color of my hair, in the texture of my hair. There's so much beauty in my body type. There's so much beauty in the way I speak, the way my parents speak. There's so much that I can embrace. And one of the things I've really committed to growing up is just, I'm going to celebrate being Black in every sense of the word. I'm gonna focus my energy as much as that a lot of like activism, and I speak against racism, but I'm going to focus my energy on celebrating being Black, celebrating Black excellence, going into history and studying my history, even if no one's going to teach it to me. But
hello,
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can't hear you properly. Can you repeat like the last sentence, please?
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so I said one thing that I decided to do was really focus on celebrating Blackness. So whether it's going and studying my history for myself, whether it's educating myself about, okay, what the ancient kings of Africa know. How was the education system in Africa? How was science? How was technology? How was, what did it mean to be a feminist in those days? And so it was really important for me, and it is today, that I educate myself constantly, because for me, I feel that is my weapon and that is my gift to my generation, in terms of saying to them, okay, you've been given a particular narrative about my people, but this is who we really are.
I really love this. I really love like how you have combated this. This is amazing, a powerful woman. But like the issue here arises is like not everyone gets into that direction, like some people get really frustrated by having those issues with racism.
Yeah.
And racism,
Exactly.
it's like a sad story is I was grown up in Germany and I also had to face racism. And it was like, in particular today, it happened in school times. So like
Yes.
when in the fundamental times, your attitude is like builded towards a current perspective that your color, it's not right, that you look like this, why are you wearing this, like this is not appropriate. Like this is where you start questioning yourself. I love the way you have like actually
Exactly.
dealt with it, because not everyone does it. Like how would you suggest like in teeny tiny steps maybe girls, boys of color to combat this? Like how did you get that attitude?
I would like to encourage mostly us who are like grown and leaders, celebrate who you are, celebrate whether it's local designers, whether it's local manufacturers, celebrate those people, talk about how amazing they are, speak about the stuff that they've done to change their community, because in that we need young children to see local heroes. For me, I haven't done my nephew, like my nephew's 4 years old, I haven't done my nephew justice if I paint Bill Gates as a hero to my nephew, but my nephew doesn't know, for example, of Mansa Musa. You know what I mean? So that for me is legacy, in terms of being intentional to teach about blackness and excellence in terms of people of color. And I don't want for young people, our young people, to aspire to, I want to go live in America. That's the African thing. It's a very common thing. Success for African children, according to what our parents had received, was you're successful if you graduate from varsity and you go and live in the United States, or you go and live in Europe and you go find a job that is owned by a Fortune 500 that does not have a black CEO, for example, and that was seen as being successful. And yet for us, it's our responsibility to affirm the fact that, you know what, South Africa is a great country. There are great opportunities in this country. You yourself are excellent. They're role models in your community, in your street, that you can look up to. And I think that's one thing racism has really done throughout the years, is try paint people of color as being disposable, got nothing to bring and got nothing to learn from. And I think that's a huge lie, because it is our strength and it is our intelligence that is driving the economies of the world, and yet the world refuses to acknowledge us. And so it's important that we change the conversations in our homes and start celebrating ourselves, because the minute young children from a young age are able to stand up and be proud of who they are, it does so much. It really, really changes the game. And I think that's one thing for me that's really, it helped me be who I am. The fact that I grew up in a home where, my dad's parents and my dad's family are very proud. Like, they used their form of activism wasn't necessarily going out to protest, but their form of activism was educating themselves on Black history and having a family that is so proud. Your Marcus Garveys, your Malcolm X's, like those are names that I know for a lot of young Black children, young Black people, they don't know them until maybe they're like old enough to research for themselves, but I was so privileged to grow up in a home that celebrates the intelligence of Black people, the intelligence and the innovative mind of Black people. And so I've always seen myself as being, you know, not inferior, and that is something I'm really grateful for, and I would love to pass on to other generations to know that there's nothing inferior about us. Yeah.
Yeah, great. I think definitely it's great to like educate your children at home. Like when you have that support at the back end at home, you know how to treat other people outside your home. You know, it's the great way to just have mentor. So yeah.
Yes.
Moving on to a bit of the George Floyd case. Like we have seen what happened. We have seen the responses of the people, how furious they got, not just like in the United States, but all around the world. So,
Yeah.
but still, the response of the government of the system was pretty late. I feel like because actually we had the proof, we all saw that, we all were like into the conversation, we wanted like answers, and it was pretty clear it was first degree murder. But why was the response so delayed?
Oh, again, goes back to, I think I could never give the accurate answer for that. But I do think the fact that George Floyd is one in hundreds that has happened to in America, one of thousands, millions around the world, says that again, it's a system that doesn't necessarily fight for Black people in the way that it fights for white people. And everything goes back to that. Everything goes back to that. You know, there could be many excuses. Government could say, oh, we didn't have enough facts, we had to do the research, da, 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 da. But at the end of the day, I do think it does go back and speak to the fact that we are living in a society where being Black is seen as being a crime. And that is something that has been passed on historically, you know, that if you're Black, then immediately you're a criminal, or immediately you don't know enough, you can't bring enough to the table, and you're not worth fighting for, because your one life is just one, you're just a number. There's no sense of human value. So I think everything boils down to that, to the fact that there is no sense of human value, no sense of human respect. And so how do you respect people's human rights if firstly you don't even see them as being human? You're desensitized to their humanity, which I think for a lot of people, that's all racism is, the fact that they've been trained historically to not value a certain race as being human.
Yeah, and like you just mentioned, they have been like, can you repeat your last sentence?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm just saying, like, the fact that the trend has been not to value or respect people of color, like not value their lives, that makes it so much easier for the system to let criminals, like the people who killed George Floyd, to let them get away with things, because there's no sense of respect or human value for people of color. And we see this every day.
I think we all have seen
Yeah.
that, like, one thing, when you are out someplace and something happens, the first people who get arrested or like are questioned are those who are of darker skin color, maybe the Black people, maybe the brown people. So yeah, I definitely get your point. So what would you say overall did us show the delayed response? Like, what can we like conclude as a Black community, brown community, overall, everyone? What can we conclude from this? Like, what do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I think again, like, it goes back to the fact that the system doesn't work. It's not a system that was built for us. It's not a system that was built to celebrate us or to create space for us. So I think we need to go back to the drawing board and say, Yes, we're electing people into office. Yes, we're voting. Yes, all of the stuff, which does help to a certain extent. But until we dismantle that system that upholds racism, in schools, that upholds racism in, the healthcare system, the fact that, the hospitals in communities with majority people of color are compromised in terms of service and the quality they get. All the conversations that go along with ensuring that people of color don't get the best when they should, or are being treated less than a particular group of people, that means that there's something in the system that needs to happen.
Yeah. So definitely we can just like get out of it is like basically the movement. It's not just like based on those on that particular case, or it's not about those four police officers, right? It's about like systematic. It's the systematic racism that has been like practiced on the Black community in particular over those decades. So
exactly.
We have already talked a bit about the systematic racism. So can we get a bit more deeper into it? Like, what's your whole opinion about the systematic racism?
Just like I've said, I think all of these things are to perpetuate the fact that there's no value for human life or no respect for people of color, and not wanting to celebrate the intelligence or the knowledge of people of color, which is sad, but it all ties back to the system. And until we dismantle that system, until we are brave and bold enough to say that this system is capitalist, it's not profiting everyone, it's only profiting certain people. It's intending that money is not shared or wealth is not shared equally amongst the people. All those things are things that we need to take into consideration, which are all perpetuated through systemic racism with an intention to ensure that at the end of the day, people of color are not celebrated, are not heard, and are not taken seriously. And their lives at the end, it goes back to their lives not being valued.
Okay. So we have, on the one hand, we have this system, we have systematic racism, right? So on the other hand, we have the leadership. So we all know Donald Trump, he is kind of a racist. So we have everyone, we can witness it actually. So having a racist leader is like the racist, in particular, the allowance to practice racism, right? So what, in your opinion, does the leadership kind of have a role in the whole systematic racism? Like, what's your opinion about this, about the leadership and racism, and what kind of connection is there between those two things?
Yeah. So in any system, a system is made up of people. So we can't blame a system and not hold people accountable, because it is people who sign laws into place or abolish laws. And so it's the same everywhere around the world. It's everywhere around the world. When slavery started, someone had a pen and a paper and they had to sign in and say slavery is legal. And someone had to sign in and say apartheid is legal. Just because someone signed it and said it's legal didn't make it right. And I think that's where the fact that we can't just say, oh, it's all airy-fairy systemic racism, it's a system, we're blaming the system. No, but there are people behind the system. There are people funding that system. There are people who are making sure that every day this system that is only benefiting a particular group of people carries on to function every day, and it's not being held accountable, and there's no threat to that system's existence that is coming from people. So leadership is everything. People are everything. At the core of every system, there are people. People make up systems.
And how can we like overcome racism through leadership? Like, what would be your point of view?
I think there are many things to do, but I think at this point in history, we first and foremost need to have leaders that acknowledge that systemic racism exists, because I think as long as we have leaders that pretend there's no problem, we have a big problem. And for years, I think we've allowed leaders to, like I said, like do charity and blame it on, oh, black and black killings and all these things, and instead of grilling down to the fact that there is an issue, there's an elephant in the room that no one wants to acknowledge, and that is racism. That is the history and the legacy of colonialism that people don't want to talk about. And so it's so important that as leaders, we acknowledge the problem. We can't like overlook and pretend things aren't happening or not existing. It's very important that we actually acknowledge what is going on.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that the leadership overall has a huge role in the whole scenario, you know, like, because like you said, if there is no authority, if the authority is given to act in that particular way, it will happen. Eventually it will happen. But if it is like stopped on a level, so it might be possible that in the future it is going to be decreased, and eventually it's going to be eliminated, that like whatever it might be, whatever situation. So I definitely agree with you.
Exactly.
So apart from leadership, like, how do you think we all together can combat like racism as a unity?
Yeah, it's an everyday thing. It's an everyday thing, like being conscious, being aware of our biases, being aware of our privilege. You know, there's something that was said to us when we had the Global Shapers Summit last year. And Wadia said, you know, be cognizant of your privilege. Be aware of the fact that you have a certain level of privilege, and how you use that privilege is the make or break. And I think, like what I mentioned earlier about the fact that for too long we've ignored and said, no, there's no problem. You know, it's not affecting me, so there is no problem. I think we are in a space in history where it's about acknowledging the problem, and every day, day by day, make a lifestyle change. Whether it's a lifestyle change for me, myself, like I had mentioned, instead of saying, okay, I'm just going to focus all my energy on like fighting racism as a black person, I also need to change my mindset as a person of color and say, how do I educate myself so that I can educate my nephew? How do I educate other people around me about all the things that have not been taught about black culture that are actually worth celebrating? And going back and where, you know, to my white friends, hold yourself. Not every single one of us, we have a part to play, because the way systemic racism happens is that it's in society, it's in every piece of society, and every single person is either affected or impacted by it. And so moving forward, I think we have such a great opportunity, and there's so many things have come out of this moment to help everybody get involved in some way or another, to educate themselves and to read and to get in touch with people and to give and to sign petitions, and just to reflect on our own personal biases, and in instances where we have not spoken up, or actually we have said, yes, okay, we're going to just come on and just accept the norm, or change actually continues.
Right, I definitely agree with you that we all have learned a lot, especially those people who never interacted maybe with the topic. We're like kind of pushed towards the whole situation to research, to like, you know, talk about this topic, to talk to other people, to talk to black people, and get to know how they are actually living and what is racism to them.
Yes.
So definitely we are now acknowledging what is happening. So it means it can just get better. Or what do you think, like, what actions have still to be taken to ensure that such incidents as like George Floyd and all those other cases, like there's so many names, that such incidents don't happen in the future? Like, what do we have to ensure?
There's quite a lot, you know, the fact that oh, like there's so many spaces in the education space. I've been speaking about education a lot. The fact that Black history is not taught in education, in the education system. Children are not taught to celebrate the good parts of their history. A lot of times when Black history is taught, it starts at slavery, as if we were not a people of excellence, we were not a people of leadership, we were not a people of unity and community before slavery. And so those are the little things that I think, you know, our governments need to be held accountable to. Like, if you're going to act, then go back and change what you're teaching us in history. Go back and reference the people who really invented stuff instead of just giving us the people who were slave owners and stole other people's ideas or thoughts and creativity. So those are the things that I think there's so much, like every part of society. Going to the healthcare system, how are you ensuring that quality healthcare is received by all? How are we ensuring that rights in our countries are actually favoring people equally? When I go to the grocery store is not different from my white colleague or my white friend, because those are things that exist in South Africa. They exist around the world. Something as simple as going into a shopping mall, you're treated completely differently because of the color of your skin. So it's those little things that are in everyday life that we have to change.
Yeah, definitely. And you were so right when you say we have to start by our institutes, our school system. Like, I think this is where our fundamentals begin, you know, when you are educated not only about the Holocaust or any other issues, but also the Black history. We have so many great Black people. We have, like you mentioned, Malcolm X, we have Martin Luther King, and so many more. So I think this is where everything begins, when we as children are given the right input, so we as an adult are going to give the right output when we have to face a person of other you know, race or other like religion or whatever. So I definitely agree with you. So at the very end of the conversation, people, I have one last question. Like, right now, you know, the whole situation, what's happening, how can we, like, right now help the Black community, like as we as brown people, we as white people? How can we right now, like, there's that one option to support Black businesses, right? So what else can we do to actually show them our support?
I think educating yourselves, that's the most important thing. Educate yourselves, listen, hear people's stories. One thing I've always struggled with in South Africa is the fact that for a long time our stories have not been heard or listened to. There's always been assuming, helping out of assumption. Oh, you need my help and I'm going to do it in my way. But never actually sitting down and asking people, so what is really happening? How do you feel? And I think white and brown people, the responsibility is, listen, we don't want charity. This is not a time in history. We don't want charity. Because again, charity repeats the circle of slavery and dependency and victimization. And I think we don't need charity. We need people to listen to us. We need people to respect us, respect our views, our opinions, respect our businesses, our families, just people of color, and don't overlook and make assumptions. I think the most dangerous thing in history has been the fact that a lot of help has come from assumption, helping by assumption, but not actually really being consultative in when you say you're making a difference or want to make a difference.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually good to know, because right now what people are doing, they're donating, but it's very important, like you said, to listen actually what's happening, to understand the issue, and then to look forward to, like,
to eliminate such factors who would create in future such issues. So you are definitely right. So I think we are at the very end of our conversation, and I think it was pretty amazing to have this talk. It's really, really important actually that we talk about it. Like you
Yeah.
said, racism, it's based about race and your skin color, which is actually pretty pathetic if you think about it like that. You treat someone else in a different way just because they have a different skin color. But yeah, it exists. So when you realize like what's actually happening, we can like fight against it when we teach our children about it, when we teach not just only our children but other children. We teach our friends and we talk to our like teachers, parents, and maybe eventually it might end. So yeah, what do you have to say, Alpha?
Yeah, I think just carry on educating yourselves. Educate yourselves and listen to people's stories. There's so, every Black person has a story when it comes to racism, a personal story, not a story, not a story they read or watched on TV, a personal story. And it's important that we listen to those stories because behind every story is how that story changed someone's life forever. And that's where healing begins, when we're not saying, oh, we want everyone to heal, we're going to do great acts of kindness for people to heal. Healing is actually individual, and it has to be on a one-on-one, on a personal basis. So I'd really encourage people to just listen to people's stories and educate themselves.
Okay, great for you. Thank you so much for joining me today again. It was good to have you. It was good to talk about this. And
Yeah.
I really hope with the current situation, it has taught us a lot. We just have like to realize actually what's happening. And racism, again, is something that mostly the Black community, also the brown community has faced. So also what I would like to say to those brown people is like, because there have been, some hypocrisy from brown people regarding that racism when we talk about like how you are towards Black people just because they are a skin tone darker than you, because that's not right. And I also feel like when we are in these times, we have to show our friends, our Black people, our Black brothers and sisters that we are with them. Do it with the post, message them, talk to them. Like you said, it's very, very important actually. It's good for their mental health. It's good for you to know about the situation. So yeah, this is it from my side actually. Aviva, is there anything you would like to say at the very end? Yeah, please.
Thank you for having me, Sadahat. Thank you so much. And thank you for being willing to ask questions and to listen. I appreciate it.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you again, Aviva. I hope you are doing well. I hope your family is doing well. Take care. And yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Keep well. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
So this was my conversation with Aviva Fanani, the creator of Global Shapers Hub Cape Town. We talked about racism, colorism, we talked about white supremacy and the Black Lives Matter movement. We also looked into topics like how systematic racism is in the system and how it can be overcome through leadership and other factors. So yeah, that's it from my side actually. I hope you take the time, have a look at the video. Like Aviva said, you listen to Black people. If you have Black friends, listen to them, talk to them. And yeah, that's it from my side. I hope you all are doing well. Take care. See you. Bye.